We are back. Hello, and a very warm welcome. Here are some familiar faces for you, and perhaps in the mix, one not so familiar face that you're looking at on the screen right now. But fear not, we're about to introduce you to what we believe is going to be another wonderful guest to add to the long list of great people we've had here on the Coaching Hour podcast. I'm Paul Rotherham. Nice to have you with us. I'm joined, as always, by the Coaches Network South Africa team in the form of Mary and Mareka. And today's guest is, in fact, a friend of Mary's. So, Mary, you get to do the introduction today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited about introducing Martijn. How do you say it? Martijn. Martijn is from the Netherlands. So we're really honored to have you on our podcast. Martijn is a PSYCH-K facilitator and also a PSYCH-K instructor. And that's not something to be frowned upon. To be a PSYCH-K instructor, you need something really special. And he's also a business consultant for 30 years. So welcome. And I know you're going to enjoy this.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Mareka, for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, Martijn, how did you get into PSYCH-K? I mean, business consulting on the one end, PSYCH-K on the other. How did you get into the space?
Yeah, that's the main question, isn't it? It's a bit strange for some people. So if I have to go back a bit in history and time. I did a computer science studies at university a long time ago. So I have a very technical background, and I also started to work in that world. And ultimately, over the 30 years that I had a career, it was mostly focused on digital marketing and ultimately product management. And I went through a few employers. I was self-employed in the beginning, and then I became an employee, and ultimately ending up with Ernst & Young, a huge consulting firm, global consulting firm, in their global marketing department, responsible for product management. But that's the business side. That was my work life. There was also a private life. And there were things happening in my life, and I suppose we all have our own stories. And end of the last millennium, end of the last millennium, I experienced some setbacks, and I started to work more on my inner journey, as I would like to call that. So what makes me tick? Why do I sometimes feel the way I feel? Why do I respond the way I respond? And I looked into various modalities. Of course, I saw just a regular mainstream modality, which is a psychologist, but that didn't really work for me. And then I went into family constellations and neuro-linguistic programming, and there's much more stuff that I've been doing. And more, I found that inner journey is as important as the outer journey in our world. Until in 2013, which is now 12 years ago, I met PSYCH-K, which is a modality, which is a method to change limiting beliefs. And up until that point, I had done a lot on the inner journey, and I gained a lot of insight about myself and why I do the things. But the actual change was difficult. Yes, I learned coping strategies. Yes, I was in certain situations better than before. At least that's what I thought. But then in 2013, when I met PSYCH-K, my wife took it home actually, because she met it just before me. I realized that it was a method that really helped me to change my limiting beliefs and change me from the inside. And so for the past 11, 12 years, I've been on a journey with that modality to improve myself.
Now, if you talk about beliefs, before we get into PSYCH-K, for someone that is not familiar with the effect of beliefs in our life, why was it so important for you to change your beliefs? And what is that effect that beliefs have in our life?
I think that ultimately the beliefs is where everything starts internally in ourselves. So our beliefs ultimately become our thoughts, and that then leads to behaviors. So if I have a belief deep down inside that, as an example, I am not good enough, then I will do my utmost best in my life to be good enough. I will work hard. I will be kind to other people. I will serve whatever I can. So because I don't want to have that belief, I don't want to have the feelings that come with that belief that I am not good enough. So the belief is ultimately the base on top of which feelings, behaviors, thoughts are built. And that means that if you don't change the belief, but just try to change your feelings or your behaviors, yes, you're walking in the right direction. And it is on the level that does not make the ultimate change, because it's on that level whereby it still is a coping strategy, because underneath, my subconscious is constantly feeding everything I do with the belief it still has. So to me, short answer, the belief is the base, on top of which thoughts, feelings, behaviors, actions in the outside world are built.
I guess the first question, Martijn, is how do we get to discover what our belief system is? Because it sounds as if it's so many layers below the surface, just finding out that could actually be difficult.
Well, it definitely is a journey into your inner world. And sometimes that's difficult, and sometimes that is not even so difficult. To give you a simple example, and maybe for the listeners here, it is, and the viewers, it is nice to practice that one time. And we will talk about PSYCH-K later, but after the workshop that I am an instructor for, we have a 30-day challenge. And one of the exercises we give people is a very simple one. And it's a beautiful one as well. We tell people, if you have that voice in your head, you're angry about something or frustrated, or you have some fear, and you hear that little voice inside of you, take your phone and record yourself for about 2 minutes. And just let go. Anything that comes up in your mind, just talk to your phone. It's only for you. And then after about 2 minutes, stop talking. Rewind. Well, in these days, we don't rewind anymore, but then play the recording and listen with an open, curious mind. Listen to yourself. Listen to your inner voice. And it will give you the information about your belief system, because it will suddenly say, let me give a real life example. I'm in my car and I am very annoyed by other drivers around me. They are aggressive. They don't know where their brake is. They don't know how to signal direction. They do everything wrong, I think.
Sounds like you live in South Africa.
Yes, maybe that's something we all have in common around the world. So if I talk to myself, I will probably be cursing about other people and how they are bad and how they don't listen to me and they should make room for me. And, all those, just be honest and just record yourself. And then when you listen back and you hear yourself say those things, you will probably wonder about who you are. And then the trick in PSYCH-K, well, it's not really a trick, but the wonder question, the miracle question is, what do you want instead? So instead of me thinking that all the other drivers are stupid, what do I want instead? I want to be I want to be a good driver. I want to be open to other people. Other people are allowed to make mistakes. I am allowed to make mistakes, even when I'm driving. And by doing that, you are actually first discovering your limiting beliefs, but you're immediately also focusing on what it is you want instead of those limiting beliefs. But yes, Paul, sometimes, this is a simple exercise, and sometimes you are at a certain blind spot in your life, and it can be a bit more challenging.
I'd like to suggest, and I've been down the psyche route, I think both Mary and Mareka have as well, but I'd like to suggest, and I think it's a wonderful idea to record yourself. That's something, oddly enough, that even with technology, I've never really thought about doing. And I talk for a living, so for me, it should be fairly easy. But what I was going to say is, I think that the perspective on where your thoughts were and what you were saying would probably be different if you didn't listen to your recording straight away, but if you gave it a little bit of time. So in other words, if you have, I'm guessing you've given the traffic example, you've had typically there, that would be a stressful experience. And you would probably be voicing your frustration more than anything and commenting, as you said, on how terrible everyone else is. If you gave yourself a chance to cool down and then listened back, I think you'd have a very different perspective. But in the moment, if it's a 2-minute recording and then straight away, well, I'm still in that state, if I listen back to the recording, you'd probably be agreeing with everything still in that moment. Yes, they are all stupid. Nobody obeys the rules of the road. They've all paid for their driver's licenses. But play that back later that evening when you're sitting at your koi pond having a cup of tea, and all of a sudden, the perspective differs. So I guess my question is there a period in which we should be just allowing ourselves to cool down before listening back? Could we listen to that same recording a few times and follow the journey of how our mind changes just in the time that we allow to pass? I don't know. I'll be guided by you on that, but I think it's something to chew on.
Yes, oh, definitely. I like the ideas, Paul. I can imagine that if you listen back straight away, there is certain things you hear already. And then if you listen back to the same recording a little bit later, you hear other things as well. So maybe that would actually, it's a wonderful idea. And I will definitely be stealing that from you for the next workshop and challenge, because maybe when you listen to it a couple of times over time, you get even deeper to where you want to be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, getting into PSYCH-K, so you used PSYCH-K as a modality to change your beliefs. But before we get into the how, what is PSYCH-K?
What is PSYCH-K? PSYCH-K is a modality, it's a method to change your limiting beliefs into supporting beliefs at the subconscious level. So I think most of us today agree that around 95% of the time we act from our subconscious and about 5% from our conscious mind. And that's a beautiful thing. I always tell my clients and my students, what if you have to learn how to walk and drive and ride a bike and talk every day? It is beautiful that we have a subconscious and that it learns things and that it automates our life. If I want to get a glass of water, my subconscious mind is controlling all my muscles and my fingers, and it will take the glass and it won't spill a drop. It's beautiful. But our subconscious also learns things that are limiting. And typically, our life script is being written in the first 7 to 8 years of our life, when we are widely open as children and we learn from the grown-ups around us, which means that we don't write our own life script. Our life script is being written by the adults around us. And if the small child hears certain things like it wants to play outside and constantly the message is, oh, take care of the cars. Oh, take care of the cars. Oh, take care of the cars. The parent is probably saying this because they care for their children. But the small child might think, this is a dangerous world. Oh, it's dangerous to be alone outside. Oh, it's dangerous to walk over the street. And if those decisions are being made, then that is what your subconscious has programmed. Now, years later, when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, those limiting behaviors like it is dangerous outside are not serving us anymore, like they serve the small child. And then PSYCH-K, back to your question, Marijke, is PSYCH-K is a method to change those limiting beliefs into supporting beliefs, as well as to change the perception of stress at the cellular level. It really goes deep into our belief system. And if I compare it to computers, which is my background, it is reprogramming our subconscious mind. And I like, in my company, together with my wife, I like to compare our subconscious with an elephant. It is a beautiful animal. It is strong. But if it walks a path, it walks a path. It will destroy anything in its path. And I compare the conscious mind with a hummingbird. It can maneuver all sides. It is very small. It is very fast. It can quickly change direction. And if your hummingbird, if your conscious mind needs to redirect the elephant, that is going to take you too much energy. So we want that subconscious mind, that elephant, to walk the direction that gives us peace and a joyful life. And that is what PSYCH-K does. Change the direction of the elephant by changing the limiting beliefs.
Mary,
Yes.
I see you are unmuted. But before we get into a bit more of that, I've done, and Mary as well, neurolinguistic programming, for example, which is also a modality. But you said that you have done different types of modalities, but you preferred, PSYCH-K. How is PSYCH-K different from NLP, for example? What makes it so unique, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, first, I think there is lots of beautiful modalities out there. So I never compare PSYCH-K in a like, this is better than the other. For me, PSYCH-K, the experience that I have is that PSYCH-K really helped me to change my subconscious beliefs, where many other modalities that I have been trained for helped me to gain insight, helped me to create coping strategies. They not always went that deep into changing the belief system. And I'm not saying never, it's just that PSYCH-K for me does that way easier, faster, and more substantial. My experience, and we don't all need to have the same experience here. Now, what makes PSYCH-K unique? I think there's 5 elements there actually, and I will go through them very quickly. One is that it is non-prescriptive. Difficult word. What does it mean? It means that we don't put labels on people. If somebody is in a depression and somebody else is in a depression as well, they might have the same symptoms, but their history is different. So the solution to their depression is different. And what you see lots of people do there in the world is they say, oh, you have a depression, let's follow this plan, these 10 steps, and you will be fully cured. And then for some people that's true, for others it isn't. In PSYCH-K, we say, whatever you come with, whatever you want to work on, you are a unique being. Let's have a unique approach using PSYCH-K. The second thing is we believe in PSYCH-K that the wisdom is in ourselves. If people come to my practice and they say, can you please cure me? Can you please help me? Can you solve my problems? My first sentence is always, well, maybe you should help yourself because the power is in you. If I go to a physiotherapist, I typically put my knee on the table and I tell them my knee hurts, fix it. But that's not how PSYCH-K thinks. The wisdom is in you. The third thing, it's about subconscious transformation. I already mentioned that. What I love about PSYCH-K, it's about focusing on the solution. So it is not talking too much about the past. Yes, we want to know what happened in the past so that we know what to change, but let's not talk about that for an hour because you just relive your trauma if you have to talk about it for an hour. We want to touch on it and then quickly focus on the miracle question. What is it you want instead? And then the fifth element is a safety protocol. In PSYCH-K, when I facilitate somebody else in a PSYCH-K session, I will never decide myself what's good for the other person. We use our whole conscious, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the higher conscious or the superconscious mind to check whether things are safe and appropriate. So that it is really the partner in the relationship that owns the transformation. And those 5 elements I find unique. And when I discovered PSYCH-K and I started to experience the change inside of me, but then also in my outside world, I thought, okay, but this is what I really want. And this is a way for me to actually make my life better.
And
One of the things I think, oh, sorry, carry on.
The other thing about PSYCH-K that I really love is that it's sustainable change. It's not like a temporary change. It's sustainable.
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you, Mary. I remember an example where people were shouting. This is like 15 years ago. People were shouting very, very loudly. And I was walking on the sidewalk, and I froze. My response to shouting and anger was I froze. And a couple of weeks ago, people were shouting around me, and I was in a workshop, and I realized that I was not even noticing them anymore. I didn't freeze anymore. My whole, because my belief system had changed about anger and about what could happen to me, my response has changed without me having to put energy in that. So yes, it's sustainable change. And I suppose I love the word sustainable. That's what I meant with subconscious transformation. It sits at that core of who we are. Yeah, beautiful.
A question, yes, question that I had, Martin. I think we always try and turn these sessions into something practical, because theory is wonderful and we can all learn so much, but very often that theory 2 hours later, 90% of it is gone and we've forgotten. But what we do tend to remember is when somebody gives us practical ways of implementing these things. So for those who don't know what you experience when you go through PSYCH-K, which I think for many people may even sound quite airy-fairy, take us through what happens when I walk through Martijn's door as a partner. And I'm specifically using the term partner because I remember from my PSYCH-K, one of the things that we don't use is patient or client. It's a partnership. You're going through the journey together. So you open up your door, I arrive, we're enjoying a PSYCH-K session. What happens in real terms? What do we do?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I love being practical. So you come into my session, I offer you coffee and tea, of course, and then we start with the session. And the session always starts with, what is it you want to work on? So typically, people that come into my practice, they talk for about 5 minutes on what they want to discuss and what they want to work on. Let me give you an example from a year or a year and a half ago, more or less. There was an entrepreneur, he came into my practice, and what he wanted to work on, he said, Martijn, I've done so much already. I have a good business. I have a good job. I earn a decent amount of money. And the one thing that still disturbs me is when I have an empty calendar for a day and I open my calendar in the morning, I get very anxious. And what he meant, he gave me the examples, is he checks his website every 2 minutes. He checks his email every 30 seconds. He goes into Google Analytics if anybody is currently on his site, maybe booking a session. He really anxious when his calendar is empty. So he talks about that for about 5 minutes. And then I ask the question, typically, what do you want instead? Now, there's two ways that this can go. It can be that somebody, when they do that insight exploration, it can be that that there is certain emotions, or it can be that there's words. But typically what people do is they tell me what they don't want, because we're so used to that. So I fear an empty calendar. What do you want? I want my calendar not to be empty. I want more clients. I don't want to be scared. And I tell them, well, that's what you don't want. And what is it that you do want? Because that's what the focus of PSYCH-K is all about. And then in this specific example, this partner became very emotional. So there were no words anymore, but there was emotions. And then I go to the third step in PSYCH-K. The first is, what do you want to work on? The second is, what do you want instead? And the third is, let's go into a balance process. Because now there's emotion, there is stress. Let's transform the stress at the cellular level. And we do a balance process for that. And a balance, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit later, otherwise I lose the example of what happens in the session. But a balance process is a transformation process. So we did the balance process, the stress was transformed, the emotion was gone. And then I go back to step one. It's a very simple process, PSYCH-K. And I said, how are you now? And he said, oh, wow, I feel much better. But I'm brought back to when my mother passed away. And I realized that she provided safety in the family. And I'm working very hard to create safety for myself. And this was huge for this person. And I said, okay, instead of working so hard for safety, what do you want instead? So step 2 in the process. And of course, this session took 90 minutes. We are already 30 to 40 minutes in because a lot is happening while we go, but I keep it short. And I said, what do you want instead? He puzzled about the question. And suddenly he said, I just want to be safe. I am safe. That is what I want. And we did a balance process for the goal statement, I am safe. And it was beautiful again. And it took 5, maybe 7 minutes. And then he came out of it. And I said, back to step 1, how is it now? He said, oh, this is so much better. And you know what? Because he jumped to step 3 immediately. He said, what I also want, Martijn, is I just want to be good the way I am. So we did a balance for the goal statement. I am good enough exactly how I am. And we did a balance for that. And then I went back to step 1. We were now 80 minutes into the session. And I said, how is it now? He said, wow, Martijn, I've never felt this for the past 20 years since my mother passed away. And then we go to step 4 of the process in PSYCH-K, which is the action step. Because it's all beautiful if you are feeling good in my practice, and then it's all sunshine. But if your life doesn't change, then why would you do it? And his action step was to create time in his calendar a couple of times a week for himself. So instead of always creating a full calendar, he said, I want more time for me. And the next morning at 9 a.m., and I know he did it because I spoke to him 2 or 3 months later. The next morning, he just blocked his calendar for the next year, a couple of times a week for an hour or an hour and a half to have time for himself. So that's what happens in a PSYCH-K session. We go through what's called a 4-step process. We go through that circle of change. And then when you feel that you have made a step, that you are in a better place towards the end of the session, we do action steps to actually show the change in the outside world.
In this instance, Martijn, the balance happened. I would imagine it doesn't always happen, though, unfortunately.
You mean that at the end of a session, people are not yet in a good place? Or
yes, by the end of the session and even before that, in the sense that you're discussing where someone is, followed by where would you like to be, followed by a balancing process to ideally get them to that mental state of where they would like to be. PSYCH-K, I would imagine, like any modality, doesn't have a 100% success rate. There will be times where somebody just can't get to that point. Or do you find that, in fact, no, PSYCH-K does always achieve the balance?
Yeah, thank you for that addition, Paul. In every session, we do balances, but a balance that's the name for a PSYCH-K exercise. So when I, in my practice, have a session of an hour and a half, we typically do 4 to 8 balance processes, depending a bit on how quickly we get to the right goal statements. But that's a balanced process. And then the question is, when people walk outside my practice, they go home again, and maybe they have 1 session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions. Is PSYCH-K beneficial to them? My experience is that for 80%, maybe even a bit more, PSYCH-K is beneficial. But I'm completely okay that we are with 8 billion people on the world and that PSYCH-K is not for everybody per se. As we spoke before about NLP and other modalities, there's beautiful things around there. And for some people, one modality is better, for the other modality is better. And what I do see is that for 80% of the people, maybe a bit more, PSYCH-K is beneficial and will help them to transform their lives.
I thought that, sure, hold on. Sorry, did you hear that? Sorry. Okay, so what I found with the PSYCH-K, because I use it with partners every single day, is that even though there are problems that occur afterwards, the sustainable change happens with that specific balance. of what it was. Let's just say it was anger. There's no longer anger in that person's life. It's very far and few between, and they know how to be aware of their response. There will always be other issues. So with PSYCH-K, it's not a do one session and your whole life changes. It's a stepping stone to the transformation in your life. That's what I found with people, is that they're never going to ever be the same as what they were before they started with PSYCH-K balances.
Yeah, thank you for that addition, Mary. We are human beings. I always learned that we have about 70,000 thoughts a day. And recently I heard a podcast and a guy was talking saying it's 60 to 90,000 even a day. And most of these thoughts are limiting. So I see examples, and they are part of the 20% that don't think PSYCH-K is beneficial, where I do see change, but they themselves don't yet have the life that they want to have. Because to translate your words into mine, Mary, PSYCH-K is a verb. You have to do it. You have to keep changing, because changing 2 or 3 or 8 beliefs in a session might not be enough to have all the changes you want in your life. But again, I do want to say I love PSYCH-K. I use it on a daily basis. I teach it to other people. I really love it. And there's still also other modalities that are useful and helpful, give insight. So if PSYCH-K is not for you, that's fine for me. I see change always, just like you, Mary. Yes.
And PSYCH-K is a bit different than other modalities in terms of, if I understand it correctly, it works more on the body. There's certain, like you said, the balancing exercise. It's not like a meditation or a visualization like that. Not to get into too much depth, in the process, but maybe just to quickly give people an idea of what can they expect, if you say we're going to do an activity of PSYCH-K, if it makes sense.
Yes, no, it makes complete sense. And I will try to describe it. This is a bit of the challenging part, because it's like trying to explain what an orange tastes like. If you have never tasted one, I can talk for a week or a month, but you still won't know. But take one bite and you know it. And that's a bit how it works with PSYCH-K as well. You have to experience it. But let me try anyway. And maybe describe a bit what PSYCH-K does in every balance process. Because the holy grail, don't know if I should be using those words, in PSYCH-K is what's called a whole brain state. It's like where both our hemispheres are active in relation to a certain goal statement or stress. Because what typically happens in our life is that one of the hemispheres is activated more based on what happens in your outside world. So when I freeze, probably my left hemisphere, so when I gave the example, there was shouting, there was anger, I froze on the street. I literally couldn't walk anymore. And because in that state, my hemispheres are not both active anymore. My right hemisphere, where my feelings are, my creativity, where there's no time, that was probably very active and feeling sensations. And my left hemisphere, that could structure and do deduction and analyze the situation, that was shut down. So I wasn't able to shut down and realize that the shouting happened 100 meters from me. And there wasn't a threat directly to me. But because my left hemisphere is shut down, I freeze. At least that was my response. So what PSYCH-K does in every balance is use whole brain movements, and whole brain movements is using all sides of your body, because your left hemisphere controls the right side of your body and vice versa. And it uses whole brain movements in every balance to create a more balanced whole brain state between the hemispheres. And by doing that, we, in a way, create a record button to record new programs in our subconscious, which are the belief statements that we work on. So A balance process is a simple exercise, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 4 minutes, where it's all about creating the whole brain state with different movements.
Good. That explains it very well. Now, if I understand correctly from Mary, you are planning to come to South Africa soon. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I look forward to that so much. I've had several opportunities in the past to travel to South Africa, but every time it just didn't happen. So I'm really looking forward. Together with Mary, we are organizing a PSYCH-K basic workshop, which is the foundation of starting with PSYCH-K in Benoni. And we organize this from the 9th till the 11th of May. It is a 3-day workshop. It is very packed, the workshop, every day from 8:30 till 4:30. And it's packed with theory, with learning balance processes, with learning a muscle test protocol, with learning how to formulate proper, good goal statements. We talk about principles of nature. And what we mostly do is we practice a lot.
Yes.
Because the goal of the workshop is not that everybody works on their own teams and becomes a better person. The goal is that you learn the PSYCH-K processes so that right after the workshop, you can start to facilitate yourself on your growth and you can work with others on theirs.
Sure. What is the requirement, sorry, to join that training? Because you said it's only the foundation of, then assuming there's many more from there to build on.
Yes, well, there is follow-up workshops, but fortunately, the 2 balance processes that you learn during this first workshop, I use them for 80% of the time in my practice. So with that first workshop, you really have gold in your hands that can help you to change your life. And who is welcome? Well, actually, everybody who is interested in self-growth, in changing their lives, who feels attracted to today, to what we're talking about, or maybe has heard about it before. Everybody, whether it's for yourself or whether you are a coach or a counselor and you want to use it for yourself, but also with your clients, everybody is welcome because there is no prerequisites for this first workshop, apart of you want to do it.
Okay, great. So you can also just use it for yourself as a tool for
Absolutely.
self-development.
Absolutely. What I see in the Netherlands is that 50 to 60% of our participants is actually coming for themselves. And depending on the workshop, 40 to 50% is a coach themselves, and they come for themselves and to use it in their practice. Yes.
Awesome. And if people want to join that workshop, and get hold of you, who do they contact? Where do they go?
Well, they can go to my website. They can contact me on LinkedIn. I hope we can put the website in the show notes maybe, but maybe just to pronounce it once, it is called dewerf.net, DEWERF.net/SA for South Africa. So they come to the landing page that we created. I'm sure that if they know Mary already, they can contact her because I'm working together with her on this, and I'm sure she can point to the right resources. And on the website, they can read much more about PSYCH-K. There's links to a free ebook, to a webinar. There's links to the international PSYCH-K website if people want to read more. And of course, they can register or contact me through email or the contact us form because, as you probably can hear, I love to talk about PSYCH-K.
Thank you so much. I'll put all those links, in the description, so then it's easy for people just to click and go on there.
Wonderful.
Great.
Lovely. Very insightful, Martijn. We really enjoy having people like you on this show. I think it's introducing new modalities to people and giving people a very real sense of what it's all about. Obviously, not a touch on what the workshop itself will be able to do. So I've experienced this, and I can strongly suggest that you do experience it as well. Mary has done it, and Mareke, you say you've touched on it too. So it's something that I found very helpful. If I'm honest, I think I've kind of let it go a little bit and should probably bring it back into my life and become more active. It is unfortunately, as Martijn was saying, it's a case of you can have all of this knowledge, But if you don't do anything with it, that's really where, as humans, we just fall down. And I think that happens in so many areas, certainly of my life. I know what I should be doing. I've got the theory. I've watched the videos. I've had the mentorship. But that final step of application and just getting it done, that I find is always the most challenging. And I think it just comes down to us living a busy life, lots happening. So make it a date. You said from the 9th to the 11th of May. Was that right?
Exactly. And maybe
Wonderful.
because I resonated with your saying, Paul, maybe I may add that as a bonus after the workshop, we have a 30-day challenge, which is something that my wife and I have started to offer because we saw people that were so enthusiastic, but then life was busy again. So for the 30 days after the workshop, and that's fully included in the price, of course, we support you in making it a habit by creating inspiration during those 30 days, by having weekly Zoom calls for questions and about the processes. And what we see is that after those 30 days, lots of people have really made it a habit, because once you've made it a habit, you can practice PSYCH-K anywhere, always. So thank you for adding that, Paul, because that gave me a chance to mention the 30-day challenge, which is really valuable. And if there's any listeners who have actually done the workshop but have the same feeling, like, but I'm not using it anymore, we welcome repeaters as well. Of course, for a very special low price, because we love for people to pick it up again.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for your time in joining us here on the Coaches Network SA Coaching Hour podcast. We appreciate that. And of course, if you're watching this or listening to this, don't be scared. Ask your questions. Give your comments in the comments section. And I think what would be wonderful in this instance is that if you do have some experience of PSYCH-K, if you've done the course, let us know how it went for you, good or bad. It's wonderful to create these talking points and to have you involved with what we're doing here on this program. So as always, Mary and Mareka, thank you so much. To our guest Martijn, chatting about PSYCH-K today, thank you. And thank you to you for watching. We'll look forward to your company in the next one.